No, I mean, nobody else, besides me and my wife, nobody else has got a clue what I was doing. And my wife, she was here, she's fighting.
Welcome to all of you to St Mary the Virgin Hayes, which is some place that Steve knew as a child. I'm sure you understand that he went to the school here, Dr. Trippet's school. He sang in the choir here as a boy, and that's reflected in the order of service. It's lovely to have you on this day. In those days when Steve was here, the choir would sit along the sides here. They sit at the back now, but in Steve's time, the choir would have been here in the chancel near the altar. And as he says in his reminiscence, he used to earn money from weddings. I relate to that because I used to earn money from weddings when I was a teenager, and it was my main source of income, so that was all good fun. It's just lovely to have you here to remember Steve in this place where he grew up and where he knew his early life. So bless you all, bless him, love the guitar, and I'm going to hand over to Paul Faithful. He's going to guide us through the rest of it. Paul actually gave me a compliment just now. He said, I'm a rocker myself, so that's not bad for an old priest, yeah.
Absolutely,
Father. Bless you.
A hard rocker at that. So, anyway, thank you so much, Father Nick, and it's lovely to... Would you all like to sit? It's so lovely that Lisa can be here with her family, and all our sweet friends and family, and also some friends from St Mary's Hayes to support the church as well, which is what this day is all about. It's all about lovely sharing memories of Steve's life and celebrating it. I'd also like to say a big thank you to all those that supported the Just Giving page. So I know there's an awful lot of sweet fans that have made their little contributions but can't be here today. But it's such a special thing. Just within 7 days, this whole project just took off. There was a little organising committee, and here we are today, as I say, to celebrate Steve's life and just share some lovely memories. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask people to come forward, but if anyone would like to share their memories of Steve before Lisa and Marilyn come forward, then just raise your hand and please just come forward. But I'm going to ask Karen, who's a mad sweet fan, just to kick off proceedings. So if you'd like to just share your memories first of all, Karen.
Blue lights flashing and a black-fisted glove upon every member showing a personality that had been captivated and mesmerised. Steve with his black painted eyes seducing the camera. We just haven't got a clue what to do. Was the words. Well, I did. That was the moment I became a lifelong fan. So when I had the opportunity of meeting Steve for the first time, to say I was euphoric was an understatement. They say you should never meet your idols, but they obviously had met Steve Priest. Rock City, Nottingham, March the 7th, 1981, is a day my dream came true, an unforgettable experience in my sweet life. We arrived early, we being my sister Jane, and a lifelong sweet fan, Phil Vincent, who still today is my friend, and we still tour and see the suite together. We decided to walk around the building and we came across the stage doors. We could hear music, and though we thought the band had already inside. At that moment, a minivan pulled up and reversed back out again. I remember it had blacked out windows. We ran after it, not knowing, just hoping that maybe the band might be inside. It pulled up at the entrance, and like the scene from the Sweeney, 3 fur-clad rock stars jumped out. Steve was the first out. You probably wanted to jump right back in as he was greeted by a screaming euphoric fan. Teenager. But instead, he met me with open arms and gave me the biggest hug. He was gracious, warm and welcoming, and engaged in conversation and made us feel at ease. He commented on our t-shirts that we had specially printed. They had the iconic logo of Sweet on them, and he asked where we got them from. We felt extremely proud. We were invited into the foyer, where he gladly posed for some more photos and some more engaged in more conversation. He put his arm around me almost to keep me calm. I felt the radiation of his warmth and kindness. That evening, before the show, he was in the bar, chatting and drinking with other fans. He was happy to pose for more photos, and I had a chance for one more model. It was a nice surprise to read in his book that he mentions that evening and states how much he enjoyed meeting and drinking with the fans. I feel extremely blessed to have met Steve and to have shared that moment in time. A true gentleman. God bless you, Steve. Thank you for the music and the memories, too many to be forgotten. I'd like to finish by reading a poem that I wrote when I was 14 years old. It's called Why. Why? Because people would ask me why I love the sweet so much. The poem means as much to me now as it did back then. So I'd like to dedicate this to the 4 men in makeup, as I call them, the men in heels. Why? They are always there to catch my fall, pick me up and dust me down. Take me to a place where no one else can invade my space. They are the blanket that keeps me safe. They never fail to lift my spirits. They keep that smile upon my face. My sanctuary, my piece of heaven. Their music is my saving grace. When I'm rocking to a song, I let myself go. I am me, I am free. I love the sweet. They have never left me or let me down, and I sure love having them around. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Karen. And can I invite Cheryl up now to share a few memories?
I just want to say how wonderful it is to see so many people here today, people that have travelled far and wide to pay their respects and to honour Steve here in the very church where Steve sang in the choir and attended Dr. Tripplett's store just across the road. My first memory of Steve Priest was as a 9-year-old watching Top of the Pops and seeing this guy dressed in full Indian headgear, wearing makeup, pouting and making eyes at the camera. I was intrigued from that moment on and became an avid fan of the Swede. I joined the fan club run by Christine Wood in 1973 and still have the signed black and white photo, letter and membership card. I lived in Hillingdon at the time and soon realised that the band lived very close to me. When my dad used to drive around the area, I remember looking out the window of the car hoping to catch a glimpse of one of the band, but I never did. I followed the band through the 70s, buying the records and magazines, my first proper album being Sweet's Biggest Hits, which I bought for something like £1.25 from a local record store just down the road in Long at the top of Long Lane, and remained special to me for that reason. I was too young to go to any of the gigs back then, and when the Rainbow gig or the 1978 Hammersmith Odeon gig is talked about, I feel really sad that I wasn't there. They were such iconic gigs to have been at. Fast forward 20 or so years to the late 1990s, with the onset of the internet, I found Sweet again. Steve used to run his own message board from the USA, which gave the fans a chance to interact with him, to ask questions. Mainly sometimes there would be competitions where Steve would give away a CD or something similar. It was good fun, and sometimes, especially with the time difference between the US and the UK, things that were written the night before were quickly taken down by the next morning. As you can imagine, Steve had a great sense of humour and could be quite naughty at times. Then there was his book with the unmistakable title, Are You Ready, Steve?, which I bought from the USA, which was personally signed for everyone who bought the book at the time. The book was a real eye-opener for me, that's for sure, so much so that I had to go back and read some parts of it again. Sweet are such a big part of my life. I've met some amazing lifelong friends through the band, and I even met my husband Paul on the Home Sweet Home message board run by Stuart Roney. In the early 2000s, I had the pleasure of meeting Steve a couple of times socially. Once when he visited the UK, he stayed with mutual friends, and again when he came over for Mick Tucker's funeral in 2002. It was mind-blowing for me. was all very surreal. I had this huge poster of the band in their Indian outfits, which I brought along one time for Steve to sign for me. I was known on the Sweet Message boards at the time as Lost Angel, and I remember Steve asking if he should sign me Lost Angel or Cheryl. As he knew me as Lost Angel back then, he signed it LA. I still have the poster, and it's one of my most treasured possessions to this day. They say you should never meet your hero, but Steve certainly didn't shatter any illusions I may have had. I found him to be charming, kind, very humorous, and a little bit shy. Amidst all the makeup, one-liners, tongue-in-cheek humour, and cheekiness, was a proper talented musician who knew his craft. From reading about the early days, he was determined to make it big, and I'm so thankful that he did. When you left us, Steve, we were definitely not ready. You are loved and in our hearts forever. Happy 74th birthday, Steve. We love you. God bless.
Thanks, Cheryl. There seems to be a common theme here. I'm ladies of a certain age, but I'm sure so many people can relate to those stories. Now, I know Woody would like to say a few words. So,
As a lady of a certain age.
indeed. A slightly different perspective, Steve.
Sorry, I'm late. I mean, when I was first asked by Cheryl if I'd say something, I felt a bit of a rogue, I mean, there's people who've known him all their lives and fans who are much fannier than I am. But I thought, I know I can speak from the perspective of a fan and how it affected me growing up. June 1971, Coco, top of the pops. Friday in school next day, all the girls were raving about Steve, who wearing a red shirt at one point turned to the camera and just did that, just smiled, and they all fell in love with him. So did I. And at that moment I thought, I'm going to try and make myself a little bit more like Steve Priest. Initially that was quite easy. I just started growing my hair. I needed to take a couple of years, but eventually I would get there. As the hits moved on, I would get a makeup treatment by some of the girls in my film class. I remember after one performance in particular on Top of the Pops, they did all my eye makeup for me. And I remember the headmistress coming into the class because we were making a bit of a noise, and she looked at me. Then she looked at me again, and then went out. She knew there was something that wasn't quite right, but she couldn't work it out. Happy days. I decided then, I think, that he was going to be my role model. What I fell in love with him as part of his performing, we know he's an absolute genius bass player, absolutely amazing. My generation, cover of the Who hit record, absolutely astonishing, the bass riff that he does. Anyway, but here's some words that you probably recognise. Try a little touch. We just haven't got a clue. Mama, you don't understand. Julie and Johnny. Foxy on the run. Lies in your eyes don't disguise. Hey man, you want some kind of trip? Don't give me no tip. Those little vocal bits that he was given initially by Chapman, I assume, they recognised that he was a character, and he was a real character. He was also incredibly intelligent. I found, as time moved on, and through the website again, we started exchanging emails. He would be talking about how he was doing up his Thunderbird and not quite getting round to it. I'd be talking about how I was doing up my Triumph Bonneville and never quite getting round to it. We realised we had some things in common. When I first met him, I'll try and avoid that phrase about meeting your idols or meeting your heroes. It hadn't really occurred to me, but I was standing waiting for his taxi to arrive outside the Hard Rock Cafe. We were there for I think it was Brian's birthday after Brian died. Strange thing. Anyway, some sort of a memorial birthday gig. And I suddenly realised, what am I going to say? How am I going to greet him? It's Steve Parish. I'm meeting him for the first time after all of these years. He got out of the taxi, and no words came out. Didn't need to. He looked up, and he went, "Woody, I've been dying to meet you." And gave me a big hug. Everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. And it was. And he said, "Come on, let's go and have a beer." And we went in, and there were lots of people there. There was Dave Hill, who's been cleverly cut off the picture on the front of your, I was going to say brochure, order of service. And there were people from Mud. But everybody wanted to see Steve. Everybody wanted to meet Steve. He performed Restless. It was like, his voice, the purring that he could do, the way he was singing the word Restless. It took about 5 minutes to get to the end of that word. One high point for me was in a pub, and I sang Hellraiser. And when I finished, I looked down at Steve, who was sitting in the front row, and he went. And I thought, "You're lying, but thanks for that." Because one day I'll be able to tell a lot of people about it. I was walking down Piccadilly after the first time I'd ever met him. I got about halfway down towards Piccadilly, having said goodbye, and I've often been worried about my mental state at that time, possibly because I got a wife and I was going to have children, and yet I found myself thinking, I actually paused, and I went, it doesn't get any better than this. I can't imagine anything in my life getting better than this. I went on 2 or 3 more steps and went, I honestly could die now. Here. And draw a line under it. And that's how Steve had affected me right from that first morning right up until the present time. I still feel very much the same. Although my wife and 2 children, they do get some thoughts from time to time. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Steve.
Cheryl said 2 minutes.
I only met John today, about 15 minutes ago, and he's got some incredible stories. I won't spoil your thunder, John, but it's lovely to have you here, and please share your memories.
Right, okay, fine. I'm John Curson. I went to school with Steve at Dr. Triplets and Mellor Lane. We both were in the junior school, as I said, and we weren't into rock and roll. But when we were both in the senior school, I started playing drums, Steve started playing bass, because his parents used to have a Hawaiian band. Do you know that? Yes? Okay. Fine. Yeah, Steve was a great lad, we had some fun. I never ever worked with him, actually. I worked with a band called Episode 6. Other bands before that done Europe, like all the other guys did at from this area, West London anyway, like Cliff Bennett, you know, all them guys around that time. The last time I saw Steve was, it was about 25 years ago sometime. I was in California and I drove to his house in Pasadena. I rang him previously, I'm sure. And we sat down for about 8 hours of tea and cake and tea, because I was driving. And we just talked about our formative years, the rock and roll, the cricket, the football we played at Dr. Tripp's, my goodness, it was poor. The football was anyway. That's interesting. So, other than that, I have his book actually, which he signed for me. I don't know if it's still published, is it? It's still published. And that's quite interesting as well. It wasn't as, it's a bit more rude than my book actually. So, if you would like to read my book as well, it's called It Ain't Rock and Roll. It was written by somebody else, but by John Parish. So, if you want to ask me any questions later, if I remember them brilliantly, I'm getting an old man now. So, thank you very much for letting me have
John,
that
thank you
word.
so much.